Digivation Network.
Okay, this is Engineer Gbenga Adebayo. He is the chairman of the Association of Licensed Telecommunications Operators of Nigeria. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me. Good day, viewers.
Okay, so we're just having a brief conversation regarding the new charge for mobile banking services in the country. That was just the new directive that was just given, or rather agreed upon by the CBN and NCC just 2 days ago.
Okay, so let me pick it up from here. So the issue now of this new charge of 6.98 naira per transaction made on a USSD code. One of the key issues that was brought up was that the banks are owing the telcos a sum of up to 42 billion naira, if I'm right. And it has been a while, the telcos have engaged, the banks have engaged the telcos infrastructures in delivering the service. What has happened? How did it get to this point that they are owing this amount of money that is unpaid? And what is the issue between the mode of payment, or if the payment should be from the banks or the consumers? But first off, how do we get to this point that the telcos are being owed that amount of money?
All right, thank you for having me. Just a few historical information. Prior to September 2019, the banks and some financial institutions and the operators had some form of sharing arrangement, which prescribes that operators will provide USSD access to the banks. The banks will receive monies for those transactions, those access, and there will be a form of revenue sharing formula between the banks and the service providers. That was called corporate billing, meaning bill will go between user A and user B, company A and user company B. That was prior September 2019. At September 2019, the NCC came out with a floor price for determining the fair price for charging for USSD sessions. The outcome of that price determination didn't go well with the bankers. And so the bankers said, instead of paying you corporate billing, we would rather pay you end user billing. You rather do end user billing. What that means is that you, as the user of the service, will pay for USSD service after the service has been enjoyed. The banks will do whatever they want at the end, whether collect the same money for the same service, keep it for themselves or not. Now, we inform the public that given the insistence of the banks, the price per USSD session may go up. What means operators will charge the end user for the service. The banks will charge the end user for the service at their own end. The end price will be higher than the current price as it were at that time. And we felt that there is a problem there. So we informed the regulator, and the regulator says, price is price. We've determined the price, and that's what it is. So we were about introducing the new pricing regime, and there was public outcry saying that how can USSD price now go from what it was to what is now being proposed? Also, more so the banks will now again be charging the users for the same service after the operators may have charged. There was public outcry. Then the Honorable Minister did intervene at the time and said, all of you stop this. Don't increase price, don't disconnect the service while we go through this process of understanding ourselves on what has happened. So the minister at the time did say we should not introduce new rates and we should not disconnect the service to the banks. Because if we had done it in 2019, by now the numbers would be different. It would not be a case of their owing us now, because at the time when banks proposed end user billing, we could say we are not going to do it and we can discontinue the service. So we will not have this outstanding as we are talking about today. So we provided services since September 2019 till now. Invoices were prepared. The banks will not accept it because according to them, they only want end user billing. They don't want corporate billing. And that's what led to the accumulation of the 42 billion naira plus. So it was for USSD services provided for the banks between September 2019 and February of 2021. That was how the debt accumulated.
So with this outstanding debt, would it be included in these current charges of 6.98 naira? Or will it be separate? Will it be paid separately?
Well, the understanding is that government was more concerned about financial inclusion. And government, the minister spoke extensively about having money Nigerians more financially included. And you know that the number of people that actually use USSD service are those in the mass. They are actually in the large number, because not unlike most of us who carries smartphones. The number of those users who actually use the USSD service are people of the future phones, and they're quite large in number. So government is concerned about financial inclusion. And in the review that was done, it was concluded that prior to now, while operators were charging per session for the services, the banks were in some cases charging as high as 10 naira for USSD transfer, USSD transaction. So it's actually way and above the determined price, so to say. And government is quite concerned about financial inclusion. And after all the conversation around what is the right and fair price, we came to a point where 698 kobo would be a fair price, and it would be a one-off charge per USSD transaction. So unlike in times past when you can have 3, 4, 5, 6 sessions, the price of which can go up to as high as 8 naira, 9 naira, 10 naira, and in addition to that, bank charges on it. Government felt that this 698 kobo would be appropriate, provided the bank will not add any other premium money. So if you actually look at it on the long run, it is to the benefit of the subscribers, because instead of paying now a 10 naira per USSD transaction to your bank, you are going to pay a one-off 698 kobo, to which the banks have committed that they will not charge any extra on it. So it's actually cheaper on the long run for the users of the USSD service in the current regime.
So technically, this is cheaper, is the best option for the consumers. But can you make sense of the public outcry? The consumers have been complaining that this is unfair on them.
Consumers will complain if they don't have the right information, because in some fora, the banks have denied that they are not charging anything for USSD services. We have that information. But the street report says something to the contrary, and that is that common USSD transfer today, some banks charge as high as 10 naira. USSD transfer between account A and account B, some banks charge as much as 20 naira for transfer. The impression we were given is that banks are not supposed to charge for USSD transfer because it's a non-banking status. But be that as it may, at 698 kobo, one-off transaction is all inclusive. And so on the long run, the users should be made to understand that instead of paying A plus B in times past, meaning pay a session or USSD transaction to your operator and another B part to the banks, we have now collectively agreed that it will be one fee, one rate that will be charged. The banks will not charge anything beyond the 698 kobo. So on the long run, actually, it's cheaper for the users, but the information must be put out there and in the correct manner in which the public will understand it. The banks do claim in certain regard that they don't charge for USSD service. As I do say, information available to us and the street feedback confirm that indeed banks do charge. In some cases, they charge as much as 10 naira per session, in some cases as high as 20 naira per session. So in this regard, it's now being pegged at 698 kobo. The consumers are actually at an advantage, much more than any other party in this conversation.
Okay, sir. That was one thing I wanted to ask you. What will be the implication of this charge, so apart from the consumers, which obviously are going to benefit from this? How is this going to resolve for all the rest of the other parties involved, for the CBN, for the telecoms, and of course the banks?
It was a collective agreement we made. The two regulators agreed to this rate. As an industry, we also agreed to it. So we think that it is a win-win for everyone, in particular for the average user on the street. Because as I did say, today's session, people are charged as much as 10 naira per session. It's now going to go down to 690 cover. We just think that it's actually best for the consumers in the long run. But we must put the right information to the public. And I think that is what is key.
So let me take you back to 2019, when one of the telcos wanted to start charging customers 4 naira for USSD transaction. One of the explanation the CBN governor put forward was that the cost of running this USSD service, running this USSD service by the telcos.
The explanation about being a sunk cost is not appropriate actually, because there is no such thing as sunk cost in telecommunication services. We must provide life cycle at all times. And telecom is a service that has to be available at all times, in all places, around the clock. So certainly there is a recurring cost for running the services from all sides, both in terms of keeping networks active, keeping the links connected and all that. So the argument of infrastructure on USSD being a sunk cost is not the right argument actually, because it's not necessarily correct. However, that said, there is a cost of providing USSD service. It includes signaling resources. Because if you look at, if you go to the details of the techniques of how telecommunication, in my view, for want of a better word, is actually not the right explanation for it. So lots of things has changed. I think now the bank, the CBN has more understanding about the dynamics of how this thing works. The public that better than what we have had in times past. And we all need to embrace this for the reasons of, for the sake of financial inclusion for the many, very many Nigerians who are using and relying on feature phone and this USSD service.
Okay, so there's also an issue of when the consumers are trying to make a transaction in a session and that transaction doesn't go through in that particular transaction, will they still be charged that 6.98 naira?
It depends at what time the transaction fails. Sometimes it's failing at the bank end. If it fails at the operator's end, meaning that this connection is not successful, we are not going to charge the operator. But if the service is delivered to the bank and it fails at the bank end, it will be recognized on the metering system of the bank. So the bank has to decide whether that is a chargeable connection or not a chargeable connection. So, but certainly at the operator's end, if the link is not established, there is no basis for metering and they will not be charged. But if the failure happens at the bank end, this is it's a link between servers. If server A is checking out with server B. If it fails at the bank end, we have no control over that. And the bank has to decide whether that's a chargeable link or chargeable transaction or not.
Toby,
yeah.
do you have any questions to ask?
Okay, what I'm looking at from this end is when you have to do transactions that are not up to that amount, the charge. For instance, you want to do, it may sound funny, but sometimes you want to do a transfer that is not up to 6 naira, and you have to pay up to that. I'm trying to look at a level of fairness in this charge. What do you have to say about this, sir?
You have to take economic decision as to what is right to do. You cannot want to go and deliver 20 naira to somebody in Obalende and take a transport of 300 naira to get there. So you have to take economic decision of what is reasonable to do. If you want to transact business of less than 6 naira, you need to determine whether it's reasonable to do it and pay 6 naira for the carriage or whether it's not. So the individual has to actually take a decision. That cannot be used as a basis to determine rates that are chargeable. You also must recognize that in instances where you are doing transaction in several multiples of that, you are sending, for argument's sake, 5 million naira, 3 million naira. It's in several multiples of that. You are only charged.
Okay, in rounding up, sir, what else would you like to say, both to the banks and to the users, the end users? What would be your final word?
I think to the banks, there's a moral question they need to answer on this issue of outstanding that we're talking about. 42 billion outstanding in debt. They enjoy the service. Why is it a problem for them to pay? They receive the money from the subscribers, from the users. They took the money directly from the customer's account. So what is it a problem to pay the operators? They have a moral question there to answer. while an argument has it that they don't charge for USSD service, because we are told that USSD is not supposed to be a chargeable service by the banks because it's a non-core financial service. But the field report, what we hear from people like all of you, suggests that when you do USSD transaction, which is not supposed to be a non-core banking service, you get charged for it. So if that assertion is correct, what is the moral basis on which the bank will enjoy this service, provided resources provided by the service, by the telecom operators, accruable over the period of time, and the banks today will argue that this money is not to be paid. So I think that's a moral question the banks have to answer there. The second is that the banks need to also be more transparent in what they are charging the users. I ask you today, how much does your bank charge you and for what do they charge you? Can you answer me in the affirmative for all the services? Can you? Most likely no. So yes. The question then is, all of these charges for this, for that, they should not make it look like now they are going to receive 998 kobo on behalf of the operator and pay to them, and that they are doing us a service by doing that. The answer is no, because we offer them the platform upon which this service is provided. Imagine that you don't have access to USSD. You have to go to a banking hall. You have to attend to a cashier. You have to queue in the bank. Today, you have to do COVID prevention measures to enter the bank. So the cost on the banks are actually higher, much, much higher. Imagine 100 of us doing today USSD transaction, and the same 100 number going to visit the branch of a bank. The money that will cost us to be there, and what will it cost the bank to receive us and have attend to that, will be more than this 690 cover that we are talking about. So the bank should not come and make it look like they are doing the industry a favor by having to receive and pay this money. The answer is no, because they have charged in several multiples of that. And for all the services of the banks that we buy, we pay. When banks sell airtime on behalf of the operators, we don't get 100% value for those airtime. If, for example, you buy now 1,000 naira airtime using your banking application, you buy 1,000 naira, the value that we get as operators is 1,000 less the percentage already paid to the bank. So if we buy loan from the bank for reasons of doing our project, we pay interest at the premium market rates. So we don't get anything for free from the bank. And so we believe that it is a moral obligation on behalf of the bank that if this money has been received, which now the public opinion has it, that they have this money in their covers, they should pay us. So it's a valid demand that we are putting on them. We didn't disconnect service in 2019 because of the ministerial intervention that we had. But now is the time that we're knocking on their door and say, pay this money, otherwise we'll take off the service. But rightly so, we thank the Honorable Minister for his intervention. We thank the Governor of CBN for his intervention. We thank our regulator for their intervention. I think we have now a way forward. And the way forward is, I will say, for all parties involved, let us at least be honorable with our words. If we say that this is what it will be, to be 698 kobo that will be charged for USSD service, money receivable and paid on behalf of the operator, do not as a bank charge the users some fraction behind that in the name of bank charges. Because if you say you will not charge beyond that, don't go behind, and because you have access to the fund sitting in your account, don't charge them more than that. If indeed they have been charging this tenor that people claim that they are charging for USSD service, stop it. So don't charge 5 naira and 690 kobo on one bread because that is for the operator, and don't go to the root of their bank account and their money and go and take their money again. So I think parties have to be honorable in this regard, and we have to do things in a way that the public can trust what we are telling them. So if we all follow the lines of our recent understanding and agreement, I think the public will be better for it. 698 kobo for USSD transaction, irrespective of how long you stay on the link, I think it's fair. I think it's good for the public, but the bank should not load any other charges on that in the name of any form of disguise or the other. Otherwise, it makes it divides the end user value. So what I'm saying, while as an industry we will honor our words, I think our colleagues and friends in the banking sector should also honor their words in that regard. And at the end of the day, the users, the public, the non-financially excluded are those that will benefit from all of this.
Thank you very much. One last question. While you were answering that, something else came up. And now, we have been discussing the issue between the banks and the telcos. That is a two-way transaction. When it has to do with, when this transaction is multiple, I was trying to say that we have been talking about transaction between the banks, the end users, and the telcos. Now, when this transaction has to do with multiple parties, like in the case of some religious organizations using the SSD code to get their members to pay their tithes and offering. Who bear the brunt for these charges?
We don't see the purpose as network operator. We don't see the purpose for your being on the USSD platform. So USSD for us is USSD. Whether you have done it to pay bank charge, to do bank transaction, or to pay a debt, or to pay a tithe, or to pay an offering, or to pay a donation, we don't see the definition of that. And so we provide the platform on a non-discriminatory basis. So the cost will be the same actually.
Okay.
Because we did say USSD service, we didn't say USSD service for banking transactions. So yeah. USSD is USSD charge. So once you're on that transport platform, the rate is non-discriminatory.
Parallel. Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, sir. It's good having you,
for having me.
We really appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, sir. Do have a lovely day.
Do have a good day. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Bye, sir.
This is Digivation Network.